Good morning, my friends. We are continuing with the Ananda way of life based on the guidelines of conduct for members of the Ananda Sevaka order. So let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to follow in your footsteps. Help us to perceive the ray of light, the melody you are singing, that in every way our lives will be a perfect reflection of your inner guidance and of your love. Make us your instruments in all that we do, that we may serve everyone we meet as a channel of your love. Om. Peace. Amen. We are working our way now through the vows that are related to the Sevaka order, and the way Swami begins, he begins with the final vow, and Sevaka life member vow. So we are in paragraph 4 of the 6 paragraphs here. This paragraph is simply one sentence. I dedicate myself to finding Thee, my God, and to serving Thee in a spirit of love through my fellow man. In a certain sense, that's all we need for this whole vow. Everything else helps us to understand how we do that. But what the power of a vow is, and what the power of the spiritual path is it puts clearly before us what we're trying to accomplish. And a lot of times we get confused because we lose track of what we're actually trying to accomplish. And we get distracted and drawn off into cul-de-sacs that may seem important in themselves, but in the end are not really taking us to where we're trying to go. So this simple phrase, the phrase before it was, henceforth I relinquish all sense of I and mine in my life, which is certainly worth saying. And it conjures up a certain image. It also says, I offer all that I own and all that I am at the feet of infinity. It's a little bit abstract, and it's certainly challenging. But here we say, I dedicate myself to finding Thee, my God, and to serving Thee in a spirit of love through my fellow man. So there we are, devotion to God and service to God in others. After all, the word Sevaka, Seva means selfless service, and a Sevaka is one who is dedicated to Seva. It also tells us, and of course this vow comes, this is, I don't know what number series of this whole series it is, but we've been talking about what it means to be a Sevaka for many weeks, many days here. And so we have a whole context in which we say this. But here is just, what was I born for? Why am I living? What do I consider success in my life? You know, there will come this time, as it will come to everyone, when we'll be completely alone, because we will be transitioning from this world to the next. And of course, all of those connections that exist on the spiritual realm, which is our soul friendships, not friendships that are just based on superficial affinities, but those friendships that are karmically developed, spiritually developed, to the point where the love and regard we have for one another transcends personality, transcends time and space. And all of those relationships, they're eternal. They move with us. That kind of love moves with us. But nonetheless, there is this solitariness about our relationship to God. Swami Kriyananda made a statement that I mention every time it is relevant because it fascinates me without my understanding it really. He talks about the fact, is the way he put it was, when the moment of liberation comes and we merge with the one spirit and we realize that there is only one spirit. He said, for just a moment, he said, a feeling of intense loneliness comes over us because we realize that we are, in fact, absolutely alone in the world because there is only one reality. He said, and then immediately that feeling is replaced by a feeling of bliss. But what I find so touching about that is I think all of us move to the edge of that existential loneliness, no matter how intimate and fulfilling our relationships, our friendships, how extensive our network of friends, how secure we feel in other people's love for us, all of those things. We still exist. We exist only in the realm of consciousness. And there is an inescapable solitude. And loneliness is a plague, especially of our times, where society is so fragmented and generational, the progress, the changing nature of the planet is so rapid that between generations, chasms of different realities can open up. And try as they might, very few people really truly understand each other. They can love you very deeply, but everyone is existing in the vortex of their own egoic self, and often those egoic limitations or prejudices just make it very difficult to cross over. This was, of course, the nature of the relationship with the Master. When Swamiji talked about his relationship with Master, and he described it as there was never any danger that Master would misunderstand him. And I certainly felt that with Swamiji. He knew me better than I knew myself, and he never misunderstood me. I mean, sometimes I had to try to understand what it was that he was speaking to or seeing, but he just knew who I was, which, is an extraordinary experience, I have to say. But it's accessible to all of us. It's just that if there's not a physical personality present, we have to seek it deeper. But that singularity of consciousness, there will be the moment when we stop breathing, we exit from this body, the true self, the consciousness, who we are, moves on to the next reality. In that moment, everything about every decision that we've made in our life, it's the final exam, Swami calls it. What was the priority of our life? What was I really doing? Was I making money? Was I raising a family? Was I building a business? Was I, learning to sing or paint or dance? What was I really doing behind everything? I dedicate myself to finding Thee, my God, and to serving Thee. It's just one continuous sentence. To serving Thee in a spirit of love through my fellow man. This is like every day. I have one purpose, whatever it may look like, whatever form it may take. And it takes all kinds of forms. We don't have to be narrow about this. We need to make this the reality behind all the rest of it. Serving Thee in the spirit of love through my fellow man. And then everything, every mundane act, every good morning that you offer to the people in your office, every contribution you make to the projects you're working on, every cup of coffee that you serve to someone, every tiny gesture that you do, if within ourselves it's in a spirit of love to God through our fellow man, then life becomes a just endless, delightful sadhana, or at least potentially so. As a means of attaining self-realization, we're going on, I pledge my cooperative obedience and loyalty to Ananda, to those members who are responsible for guiding the community in its various aspects, and above all to the living representative of the Ananda line of gurus, the spiritual director of the Ananda Sevaka order. So, of course, we have 4 basic principles: simplicity, self-control, service, and cooperative obedience. So now we are in cooperative obedience. And here's how we put it: as a means of attaining self-realization. Swami's also, as I've mentioned several times as I read through this, Swami's also planting deeper ideas, a lot of them for the future, within the lines of this vow. Why are we following cooperative obedience? Because it's a means of attaining self-realization. So he's making a statement here, which is actually a very interesting one, that my participation and loyalty to Ananda, and that my respect for the leadership of Ananda, for those who have been given responsibility for guiding the community, that is the reason that I participate in that is because it will help me to realize God. So one of the things that I say to people when I'm trying to explain this, there's many pathways to God. It's not as if you have to be part of the Sevaka order or have to live according to the Ananda way of life to realize your divine goal. But Ananda can be a helpful pathway, a way for you to find. Becoming part of this community, when I'm talking to people about, sort of the progression of the spiritual path, you can, become a person who meditates. You can become a disciple of a great master. You can become involved, a member of an Ananda congregation. You can move into an Ananda community. And then you can keep going farther and farther as you become more and more specific about how that overall aspiration to be close to God can be fulfilled. And then Swami makes it very exact here. I've pledged myself as a means of attaining self-realization. Well, self-realization is about overcoming the ego. And overcoming meaning identifying with a greater reality than just the limited world that the ego provides for me. As a means of attaining self-realization, I pledge my cooperative obedience and loyalty. He puts both points there. I'm loyal to Ananda. Now we've moved. Ananda is a group of people. It is an organized group of people. It's an organization or an institution, or whatever words you want to use. It's an identifiable, manifested form in this world. But that in itself is not a bad thing. There's countless identifiable manifested forms, including our own physical bodies, but our marriages, our children, our relationship to our own parents, a career that we may have developed, an office that we work in, or a team that we have. There's lots of identifiable entities, and it's not a diminution of our commitment to the overarching spirit to take that overarching commitment and put it in one particular place, because Well, as Swamiji puts it, you can have a frozen lake and you can have free water running underneath it, but you can't break through the lake at every point. You have to find one point and drill down through it. And so the process of self-realization is we overcome the downward pulling energy of the material world and all its oscillating duality. In the Gita commentary that Swamiji wrote of Master's teachings, he quotes the Sanskrit phrase Three Guna rahitam, which is a definition of a self-realized master, the one who has mastered the influence of the three gunas. The three gunas are the oscillating fields of energy that keep duality in the material world going. Tamasic energy is downward pulling, Rajasic energy is just movement, neither forward nor backward. It has to be directed either from the tamasic energy or the sattvic energy. Sattvic energy moves us into the calmness of spirit, and Rajasic energy is either used to pull us up or used to pull us down. But the self-realized master transcends all of those oscillating energies. Even though sattvic is upward moving, it's still caught in the oscillation to the complete, unmoving oneness of spirit. So in order to actually master those gunas, we have to struggle for certain objectives. And this passage in the Gita, and I wish I could tell you the page, but I have to look it up so that I can say it when I say it. It was interesting because the first time I read it, I've always known that it was necessary to strive for excellence. But the question would always come up, what difference does it make? If it's all just a dream anyway, what difference does it make whether you're really good at something or not good at it? What difference does it make whether you apply yourself or you don't? It's very easy to argue intellectually that it doesn't matter, but this is the answer to that, which is we have to master the gunas. And almost always our failure, our unwillingness to commit, and our unwillingness to strive and strive until excellence is attained is because we are being distracted by the gunas. We are being pulled downward into lower energy by tamo guna, or our forces are being dissipated in pure restlessness. To master the gunas almost always means to master whatever our particular objective is. So, cooperative obedience, and we've talked about what that means, I don't have to explain it at great length here. Cooperative obedience means intelligent application of willpower for a goal that we understand by a means that will help us to attain it, and overcoming laziness and restlessness in order to do it. To be loyal also means to understand on the deepest level, what we are being loyal to, what the nature of the people we are close to, what their intentions are. There's so many levels in which we have to develop discipline and discrimination and courage and an open heart that allows us to perceive things as they truly are in the divine and not merely as they may appear in this world. Loyalty, Master said, is the first law of God. And way back in the beginning of this discussion, the very first article, I believe, no, it's not the first, it's the second, but it talks about loyalty and its grave importance, and I don't have to, again, describe it completely. But to be able to be loyal means that we have developed in the process many other essential and important qualities. So we're not talking about mindless, not being a mindless follower. It's far more subtle and sophisticated, and it's a means to attaining self-realization. It's here we are in the material world, here we are where there are objective realities that we have to accept and adapt to in a spiritually minded way, in a way that is consistent with our desire to serve God and others and our dedication to the divine. And Ananda has become a primary means in which we are going to learn these needed lessons. So, as a means of attaining self-realization. And for the future, the way I see this, because the great danger of institutions of all kinds, but it's not inherent in all institutions, it's just when they begin to fail, this is what they become, is that the institution, the perpetuation of the institution itself begins to become the priority over the serving of the individuals. Are we here to serve and to inspire as an entity, or are we just perpetuating ourselves, continuing our own culture, maintaining our own place in the world? So Swami says our loyalty to Ananda and our cooperation with those who have been put in charge because of the presumption that they have something to teach us on the spiritual path is for the sake of the spiritual benefit of the individual. When Swami was asked once, in the course of litigation actually, in a deposition, how do you define the role of the spiritual director of Ananda, which was his role at the time? He said, the role of the spiritual director is to protect the individual's interests and well-being from the institution, which is completely different than how you would normally think of it. Now, he didn't mean that the institution was the enemy, but he meant that when you are leading an organization, as Tamo Guna gets a hold of it, in whatever form it may have, it tends to become, it tends to become an end in itself and loses track with what it really is there to do, which is to serve the individual spiritually. When I talk to people about Ananda, I often say to them, when I grew up in Ananda, my spiritual childhood, my first 16 years when I lived at Ananda village, it was easier to know that Ananda didn't really exist because we had this land and we had this place and we were sort of trying to make something happen at Ananda village, but it was all so fundamentally primitive that it was hard to see an entity. There was really just us. But now, often I'm standing in this beautiful church building that we have here in Palo Alto, which has now been there for more than 20 years, 25 years. And it's a wonderful place. And because of the establishment of that building, we've been able to also develop a wonderful school. Because of the architecture of the temple, we've been able to do lots of fabulous things because of the way our community is set up geographically. We have this wonderful green area. Many things have been facilitated by the existence of physical entities. And so it's harder for me to say to people that none of this really exists, that Ananda is a collection of sincere individuals who are there to realize God. And as soon as it ceases to be something that supports people in their individual search for God, it doesn't matter how many buildings we have, it's over. And that's all we ever are, is we're dedicated to finding God and to serving God in one another. And of course we want to cooperate with that. So we cooperate with those who have been given responsibility, with faith that there is a good reason why they've been given responsibility, a reason that is beneficial to them, and by extension will be beneficial to us. We're not going to go so far as Catholic tradition has gone in saying that just because someone is your superior, then they're obviously doing God's will. Or if they're not, if they make a mistake, that God will correct it. That's, as Swami says, it's just a little too convenient. But we are going to assume, because cooperative obedience also involves the use of your own creative intelligence, that if we work together, we will be able to facilitate our own spiritual growth. So finally, this is the last line of this vow. It says, "Guide me and strengthen me. And now, bear in mind, this all started with an invocation, Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, and then through all of our gurus, all of our masters. So when we say, guide me and strengthen me, we're promising. We're speaking, to those masters. When we say, I promise, we're speaking to those masters. When we say, I pledge, we're speaking to those masters. It's important to realize that. That sets the stage for all of this. Guide me and strengthen me. So we also realize that this whole vow comes back to discipleship. And the Ananda way of life is a way of life based on discipleship. Discipleship to these masters as you get deeper into it, but discipleship in the sense that my realization is my own, but the grace of God will flow into me. The grace of the gurus, the wisdom of the masters will flow into me because I am connected to that greater reality. Guide me means helps me not to make a mistake, and strengthen me. Strengthen is a wonderful word in that context because spiritual path is for heroes, and it takes a lot of courage, a lot of willpower, and a lot of energy. So we need to have that divine grace. We'll do our very, very best, but in the end, one feels it that way. One feels that something comes into us that is not self-generated. It's a paradox of a sort because it feels like our own. It feels like this is rightfully mine, but is one of the many ways that we feel that we are part of a greater reality. It's like swimming in a river when you swim with the current. You're still swimming, but the current is helping you. You're swimming with the current instead of being thwarted by trying to go in the opposite direction from where it is flowing. Guide me, that I know where the current is, and open my heart that current can flow into me. Guide me and strengthen me in this, my divine resolution. I love that, my divine resolution. I'm not making this decision on a purely intellectual basis. I'm not making this decision as an ego-pleasing thing to do. This is a divine resolution. This is my relationship with my higher self. This is something that transcends all other resolutions that I have made. My divine resolution, that I live the rest of my life for God alone. Isn't that a wonderful, simple way to end this? That I live the rest of my life for God alone. That beautiful phrase, God alone, was strengthened greatly by Sister Gyanamata, who was Master's direct disciple and his most advanced woman disciple, who became completely free in her lifetime. And her motto was, God alone. So the last two words of this life vow, that I live the rest of my life. And what is also being declared here is, this is a demarcation line. Prior to this, I went where I wanted and did what I wanted. But now I have come to the point in my life where I'm going to draw a line and I'm going to step over it. And everything on the other side of this line will be different. Now, of course, whether or not these things prove true, this is not superstition. This is not magic. This is not like, I do this and now this is how things are. No, this is my divine resolution that they will become different. This is who I'm going to be. Swamiji said something really wonderful. He said, by the time we can define any reality in this world, it's already behind us, because life is a constant flow of energy. He said, as long as we're living, everything is changing. Consciousness changes from moment to moment. So if we're going to judge ourselves, and then Swami says, which I don't advise doing, but if you are, he said, a truer definition of yourself is not who you are now, but what you aspire to become. And especially so if we are dedicating our energy and our willpower to realizing that aspiration. Because that's the direction of the flow of our energy. And we are always a flow of energy. So where that energy is going is a truer sense of self than anything else we can say. So, guide me and strengthen me in this my divine resolution. I have made this resolution, and that resolution is that I live the rest of my life for God alone. God bless you, my friend.